everyone, and welcome to my kitchen. And today is another Cheat Meal Monday. And today's recipe comes directly from my Pennsylvania Dutch mama. I hope you stay tuned. Fanny's Diary, June 18th, 1942. Today, Daddy sold his steers to Sam. Welcome back, everyone. Today's recipe actually comes from my mother. Now, my mother was a very good cook. She was your traditional Pennsylvania Dutch cook. Her meals were not elaborate, but what she made was from scratch, and it was amazing. Here in my part of Pennsylvania, we eat a lot of starches. In the Dutch tradition, we ate a lot of potatoes, a lot of noodles, a lot of brown butter, all of those wonderful things that are comfort food. The Pennsylvania Dutch ate hearty meals. They didn't eat a lot of casseroles. They ate a lot of meat and potatoes and vegetable dishes. And today we are going to make chicken pot pie, the Lancaster County Pennsylvania Dutch traditional. So, there are two kinds of pot pie. There's actually a pot pie that looks like a pie. It has a crust on the top and a crust on the bottom. And then there is the pot pie that's like my mother made. And that is chicken and gravy and potatoes with homemade pot pie noodles. So I'm going to share with you my mother's pot pie recipe. I found the same recipe in a very old book called The Art of Pennsylvania Dutch Cooking by Edna Heller. And we are going to go by this cookbook. That way it's easier for me to explain it to you. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the chicken and the potatoes and with the broth. We're going to work on that, and then we will work on the noodles. And then when it's all done, we'll throw it together and you'll see really what it looks like. So the pot pie consists of potatoes, chicken, and celery, and a little parsley. So we're going to go over to the stove and we're going to get our meal started. Perfect meal if you have home canned chicken as well. Now, I cooked some chicken the other day. So what we do is we're going to take 3 quarts of chicken stock. Quarts of chicken stock, we're going to add some chicken. Now, it doesn't matter how much you add. It's all depend on your taste. If you like a lot of meat in your pot pie, you can go ahead and have almost a pound of it. If you don't want as much meat, you don't have to have it. To this, we're going to add 4 small potatoes. And we're going to cut them in 4s. Like this. And then to that, we're going to add just a little bit of celery. I also add the leaves. And there you go. We're going to add a little bit of salt to taste. So what I do is I just put a little bit in to begin with, and then I will go back after I taste it, add more. So what we're doing is we're going to cook this until the potatoes are soft. So it's about 1 pound of chicken, 4 small potatoes cut in quarters, and a little bit of celery in 3 quarts of chicken broth. We're going to put our lid on it, and now let's get making the homemade noodles. We are going to make the pot pie noodles, or the pot pie crackers is what they call it in PA Dutch. As you see, I'm using a food processor because it's so much easier and the dough works up so much faster. But of course, my mother did it by hand, and most of my relatives would do it by hand. So what we're going to do is we are going to go with 2½ cups of flour. I am using a pie and pastry flour, but all-purpose flour is also okay to use. You always want to use white flour. So we're going to go with 2½ cups. That's a little bit over. I may have to add a little more milk to it. And then it calls for 1/3 cup of butter, which I'm going to cut up just like this. One teaspoon of salt. Salt, and then another 1/3 cup of lard, which I use Crisco. I'm going to ask you if you can use all butter. I think some people do, but this is how my mother made it, and this is how I make it as well. So for those of you who are following along, it is 1/3 cup of lard, 1/3 cup of butter, 2½ cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 cup of milk. Now we may not use all of the milk. The milk is only to be added slowly until our dough forms enough that we can work with it. So you may not use all of your milk. Now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the food processor on. And we only put it on the pause setting until we have a dough that forms. And there it is, what it looks like. It only took about 8 seconds. So your food processor is really good for making doughs like this. So we're going to take it out. It is a wonderful dough to work with. When I say wonderful dough, I mean it just forms so nice. It's not sticky. It's just a great dough to work on. So now we're going to make our noodles. To roll our dough out. Now the thickness depends on your taste. Some people like the thick dumpling noodles where it's thick and it's so billowy and puffy. Other people like the more thinner. So we're going to go with maybe a 1/2 inch depth. I had a pastry cutter. I cannot find it anywhere. I have no idea where it is, and it really saddens me because I seem to have lost it somewhere. But you can use a knife. My mother always used just a regular knife. I also have a pizza cutter. So we're going to cut our dough in strips like this. We're going to go lengthwise. Once again, it depends on what you like. Crinkle cutter, and look, it makes it pretty. So we're going to use this crinkle cutter. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut it in little squares. Pot pie noodles are always in squares. Alright, so there is 1/2 of the dough. We're going to take our little pot pie noodles and we're going to just lay them out on our cookie sheet like this. We are going to drop these in the boiling broth and potatoes and chicken. Okay, we don't bake these. We put these in the boiling liquid. And when they float, they're ready to eat. But I'm putting it on the cookie sheet here just so I have more room to work with. So as you see, we have a really good boil here. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop our noodles in the boiling broth. Now I'm going to drop these in once and see how many it looks like. Now this will thicken up. And that's the whole idea of it. It's not really a soup. It's going to thicken up with these noodles. Or crackers is what the real Pennsylvania Dutch call them. I'm going to turn it up and want to keep it at a good boil. Okay, let me get one out and show you. See how it's starting to puff up bigger? They get a lot bigger. As you notice, I didn't season too much. I will do that at the end when all the flavors are incorporated. All right, do you see what they're doing? So what are they doing now? They're floating. That means they're finished when they float. But I'm still adding a couple more in because I may end up using most of these. The longer it sits, the more they are going to get thicker, bigger. They'll get bigger. But the recipe calls for this amount of liquid and this amount of... In my family, you know what they like to do? They like to pick out the noodles. So let's see if we can get them all in here. We'll let this cook just a little longer. And let's get back on the counter and I'll show you the finished pot pie. So let me go ahead and recap once again what we did. We took 1 pound of chicken that was already cooked and we added that to 3 quarts of chicken broth. And we added maybe about a cup of celery and 4 potatoes that were cut up in cubes. And then for the pot pie noodles or dough or crackers, we took 1/3 cup of lard, 1/3 cup of butter, 2½ cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 cup of milk. And what you did is we mixed up all of the dry ingredients and we added the milk slowly until a dough formed. I added the whole 1/2 cup of milk. When your potatoes are finished and your broth is boiling, you are going to drop the dough, the boiling broth, and you are going to slowly have that as a boil until they float on top. That means they are finished. So there we go, my friends. Chicken pot pie, made just like Grandma, just like Mama, and just like all of my ancestors so many years ago. A little bit of pepper, a little bit of salt, and let's give it a taste. I'm using my fork to try the noodles first. That is amazing. Let's go have a potato with it. That is homemade chicken pot pie. And it just reminds me a little of my mama. Mama, here's to you. And let the memories go on forever. On the last note, on a little bit of whimsical fun. So many of you complained to me. You were not happy. And what weren't you happy about? Not about my cooking. Not about my kitchen, and not about what I'm wearing. You were complaining about not seeing Mr. Bunny. You also complained about not seeing Mr. Froggy anymore. So there you go, my friends. Mr. Bunny and Mr. Froggy are back on the counter. And thank you so much for being a little bit concerned about them. Life is fun if you make it.